Thanks to this, I knew I was speaking next. First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak about a project that we've been running for the past half a decade. I need for the questions. For about half a decade. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what we've been learning in the process of doing the project, as opposed to going through a standard status report for what we're doing. The last bullet in Hugo's slide was watch the world burn on February 1st, right? We tried to burn the world in October and we failed, so it's your turn next. So I'll leave it with that. Right, so the KSK rollover. I'm not sure if everyone here is familiar with DNSSEC or not. I'm not really going to describe DNSSEC, but this is an operation within the DNS security extensions. Involves changing the key that we use in all of the validations. So for the talk, I'm going to give you a little bit about where the project is, a little bit of status, but not too much of that. But then I want to go into some of the observations about what we're experiencing in running this project. We haven't produced lessons learned yet because, quite frankly, we're not quite done, but we're going to do one soon anyway. And then something surprising about Brazil that came up in the last couple of months. For those of you who are not familiar with the KSK rollover, and first of all, I want to thank Frederico Neves for speaking about this before at GTER. I think it was last year or the year before. You gave a few talks, and Carlos Martinez has talked about this in LACNIC area. So it's been brought up here by local representatives who work with us on the key. But I know I haven't been to South America to talk about this before. But the idea here is we have a key, which is running a cryptographic key that we use for security of the DNS. Not everyone relies on it, but many people do. We have to change it. We've had one key in place since the start of security. Getting the first key in there is not that hard because no one counts on it, so we're not disrupting anything. We're changing the world. But this time, we're changing what's out there. So this is the first time we've actually changed the key. So it's very kind of a big project. And I'll explain why it was a very big project later on in the talk. But we want to do this without any disruption, do it very smoothly, and that's difficult, as you know, in operations. Where we are, we've passed many major milestones. Some people think we've actually done the work by now, but we still have some more stuff to do. We still have a few more things to go, and the next phase really is the cleanup. We have to get rid of all the cruft, all of the stuff that we've left behind, so that we get rid of, we don't keep things building up into the future. And the next thing that will be visible, in January, we will start the revocation process of the key, of the old key, rather. So this is a representation of our timeline. Some of this work actually started back in 2013, but 2015 we started the formal process of studying the issue, what would it take to make this change, designing the technical steps that would go forward, and trying to figure out what were the most important things to accomplish in going through this. Oh, by the way, the timer is down to 2.5 minutes. Okay, I just want to make, okay, good. Cool. And in 2016, we made our plans, we put the plans together, the operational plans, so that they would actually be very specific in what we're going to do step by step. We began talking about this because we realized communications was going to be a big deal. 2017, we did a lot of publicity, and we had planned to make a change, but we didn't. On October 11th of 2017, we decided not to go forward at that date, actually a few days earlier. And we paused for another year to do more publicity about what was going on. In October 11th of this year, 2018, we changed from the old key to the new key in terms of the active signing part of this. Coming in 2019 is the cleanup. We have to revoke the old key and get it out of our systems, make sure it never comes back to haunt us in any way, make sure everyone knows the key is gone, it's gone away. Now you notice that this is 5 years in the making for this project. And one thing I want to stress that it does not take 5 years to change a key. We have done two things. One is we went slow because this is a major change in the internet, unprecedented. We want to make sure things are all in place as we go down the road. We found there are many things that need to be fixed and adjusted outside of the normal control of the project. And two, we fit this into the way we normally run the KSK and the ZSK, the zone signing key rather, of the root zone. So we did not go out of our way to have special events for this. It just fit into the normal way we did business. And that meant every quarter of the year we could make a change. We could have done that all in a week, but we spent a quarter between each of the major changes. So Usually we have lots of things for operators to do in these talks about it's coming, do this. I boiled it down to this one slide for what operators would have to do now. And basically it comes down to this. If you've done absolutely nothing to prepare for the KSK rollover and you've seen no problems, keep doing that. You're okay. If you've been following RC 5011's automated updates of DNSSEC trust anchors and you've had no problems, just keep doing that. Don't change what you're doing. If nothing's broken, don't fix it. Finally, though, if you have been watching this carefully and you're doing the work by hand, you don't like the automated systems, you want to do things manual configures, in January will be time to start removing the old key from your configurations, starting in January, because right now we're just making sure that we're going to go forward. There's no indication we'll ever go backward, but just to be sure. Between January 11th and March 22nd, we'll be advertising the revocation of the new key, or the old key, sorry. And at that point, just remove the key from your configuration. If you don't do that, you won't even know. You won't know that you hadn't done it. So let me talk a little bit about what made this project such a big deal and what the issues are. What's happening with this project is we have two parts to the KSK. There's a public and private key. The private key is managed through the IANA functions operator. And it's pretty easy to do that. We just have to update the key on that end. And it's pretty trivial to do that. The public key is what people around the world who want to do DNSSEC have to configure in their name servers in order to build trust chains to validate all of the data out there. And that's a lot of work for people out there. Actually, both halves of this are pretty easy to do. The configuration of the private key, that's pretty easy. We have it in HSM, a few key clicks, we can change which key we are signing with. For anyone out there who's managing their validator, they can just update the configuration any one of a number of ways. We even have it done automatically. It's not too hard. The hardest part is getting everyone to coordinate to do this all at one time. And that coordination is all of the work here. And the coordination comes down to communication. Now, what made this communication problem special is the nature of the Internet's idea of permissionless activities, meaning that when you come to the Internet and you want to work on the Internet, you can do whatever you want. No one stops you from sending any packets you want on the Internet. And many times that's a bad thing. DDoS, people send bad, abusive traffic out there. We don't want to have that, but they can do it. We see them do it. But in general, operators who are trying to do good for the world also can do whatever they want on the Internet out there. Now, the good thing about this is that because you do what you want out there, you can innovate, you can grow, but the growth becomes very quick. If you fill everything you need to do because you don't have to register for any action you do. You just go ahead and do it. It's great growth. The problem is that from the other end of this, no one has a record of what's going on out there. Nobody knows what everyone else is doing. So for the DNSSEC, we don't know, nobody in the world knows, all of those who are validating their DNS queries. We can't tell. We have experiments where people are trying to detect that. Is this name server doing DNSSEC validation? And the answer is a lot of times we still can't tell remotely. You can't do this without knowing more about the system. The other thing that's going on too is we don't have a way to detect this remotely. We can't snoop on things. We don't want to be doing pervasive monitoring. That's a bad thing. We don't want to be watching what people are doing. So we can't really ask folks, are you doing DNSSEC? Let me know so I can tell you these things. So this has made this a kind of a more tricky thing because when we're trying to do the communications here, we have an unknown audience. And that's always been the hardest part here, trying to reach everybody out there. We've also had a very long-lasting project. So if over 5 years, getting people to pay attention when they need to pay attention is hard to judge. You know, people get bored. I had one operator, when we reminded them a week before the change that we're making a change next week, make sure your systems are ready, they wrote back to me and said, oh yeah, thanks, we forgot about it. We'd heard about it, but we forgot about it, so we never updated, but now we will, because it's going to be next week. Preparing communications is difficult. You don't know who you're talking to. You don't know where they're going to be. You don't know how they want to be talked to. Some people don't want to hear a lot of uninvited operational messages out there. Different forum out there. You could spend a whole time just traveling conference to conference, but that gets kind of old for a while and it's expensive, especially. And that's why I'm glad we had Federico and Carlos to help spread the message here. One of the things I've noticed in the project is that in the early 2015 timeframe, we had a lot of experts in DNS get together and talk about how to do the role. Very, very academic, very theoretical, very high-level conceptual way of doing this. What's the nature of trust? How do we get the key out to people? It's kind of funny that as the time got closer in 2018, everyone kind of dropped the theory and went into practical. How do we just get the key out there? And one major shift was to go through all these ways of validating keys remotely to just put the keys in the DNS software that's being distributed, whether it's bind, whether it's unbound, whether it's the not resolver or power DNS or anyone else distributing software out there. And that showed a huge shift from the theoretical to practical over time. Now, we have a technical solution to this. We have always designed the key role around the use of automated updates of DNSSEC trust anchors known as RFC 5011. This was a document from, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, which talks about how I can put a new key online on my end, and you guys, the validators out there, can just see it and assume over time that it's a good key. But we found it works. It's a functional, it's proven to work in a few cases. I mean, a few cases meaning that we don't use it a lot, but everywhere it's been used, it seems to be behaving properly. But it has problems when you come to try to manage it. And it's great to use this to just get the keys out there, but the problem is that we've been asked, that ICANN and the IANA functions operator, was to make sure that this change will not cause disruption. And that's been an issue, because this protocol gives no feedback to how it's operating. It's not very manageable. It's secure, but it's not manageable, and it's not measurable. We tried to measure it many ways. We've had issues with that. But it's, as we've seen, in retrospect, it did its job for the most part. Actually, it did its job. But beforehand, we couldn't know that it was going to do its job. We were waiting for the world to burn, and we were surprised. No smoke. So, good luck. So adventures in measure, we tried measuring things. I mean, when you try to manage something, you've got to measure it. You have to have measurements of what you're trying to manage just to have some idea what's going on there. We tried what I call third-party testing. And third-party testing is something very familiar to the internet where you have an operator who runs a service. And the operator's job is to manage the service. But someone else thinks that they can do some testing of that remotely and say, hey, your name servers are not working right, without being part of what's going on there. And that can be tricky. I mean, you can tell sometimes whether a name server is compliant with the protocol, like in the Hugo was talking about, but sometimes you can't tell how someone's running their server. In this case, trust anchors are not data. They're not protocol, they're configuration elements. They're hidden in the configuration files. They're not accessible to remote people to see what's in there. Plus, we've also warned people, don't let your DNS be open to everybody unless you really, really want to. So anyway, we tried hard with these measurements. And there were two candidates that came up. One was from the IETF called Signaling Trust Anchor Knowledge and DNS Security Extensions. That's the formal name. RFC 8145 is the number people have thrown about it. And some people call it the key tag. And it's ironic here. I mentioned we'd like to have this years ago to someone. He said, you don't want it, it's going to be a problem. Well, he worked on it and came up with it, and it was a heartache. He was right. It was a problem for us to have this data. The data was somewhat good, but it was very misleading. In fact, the IETF is already running a second effort to come up with a new way of doing the signaling, which is still not in production, so they've already tried to fix this. To give you an idea, this is a graph of the RFC 8145 key tag data we've seen since the beginning of time. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of graphs at conferences and lots of pictures up and to the right and all stuff. This one tells me absolutely nothing. Look at this. I mean, what is it? It's a mess. What are you going to conclude from this graph? It's nothing. It's that hard. Though I will, because it's a graph, I can point at it. I will focus on something at this end down here. I notice that there's this bump and there's this dip up here. And I want to talk a little bit about those two to show you kind of the futility of relying on this data. What this data did show was the adoption of software suddenly, and then the turning on of some reporting. This green line up here is the total number of reports we see over time. And you see it peaked at some point. This is, red is those that we sense trouble, meaning that they're saying we only have the old key, we don't have the new key. And this black line is a percentage of the red divided by the green, basically, and it does this. It does start going down nicely here, but still, this doesn't help me much with strategy. And to further really give you the idea that we are curious of this data, this line here corresponds with the day that we rolled the key. So on October 11th, when we put out the new signature, and October 13th, this 2-day period is significant because in those 2 days is when the TTL expired and everyone went from the old key to the new key. They had to go to the new key by then. And the percentage of those saying that they were in trouble rose sharply, which is kind of weird. And then it fell. And then, as you noticed before, the line was coming down. And so it's been on this slow, random bubbling down ever since. Now, the weird thing is, it should be at 0. This isn't getting ready for the roll. This is after the roll. Anything that's causing this percentage is not working today. It's not doing its job. It's broken. Somewhere it's broken, and no one is noticing this. So we don't really know why this is happening. As you see here, this little dip here I want to talk about, that's an example of sampling error. What happened was one of the name server operators out there reconfigured their name server's software, and for a while stopped reporting this, and then it came back. When you have a reporting mechanism where people are opting in to send data, it's very difficult to count on it. So that's another thing with the caution here. We don't know the data coming into us is meaningful because we don't know the sender really is sending it. And we have no idea why it's going down. We knew why it went up when people just put new software out there. That was great. But it's been going off, and we don't know why people would be turning this off because it's been working. And we certainly don't know why there was this rise in reports, because this is not necessarily a rise in activity, it's a rise in percentage of badness. So really difficult to work with this. What I'm trying to impress on you is we really still need to figure out how to measure this as we go forward, despite the fact that we didn't make the world burn. So why measurements, and we've tried. We had a lot of people who were very expert in the field try to figure out how can we possibly measure this, and we came out empty. Part of this is, and I think I'm going to, so the DNS is not built to make this easy. The DNS really is meant to grow. It's meant to say that people who are using the DNS don't have to register with anyone to say they want to use the DNS data. So information from the DNS flows outward. People query the authoritative servers go to recursive servers, through forwarders down to stub resolvers. It's all one directional. If we have to know what's going on in those servers out there, we can't tell from within the protocol. The protocol just does not have that in it. So we need out-of-band ways of doing things. And so we have to start thinking that, how can I possibly manage a service when I can't ask through the protocol? And I've done decades of work of DNS testing, and the more you test, the more you realize you really can't tell what someone else is thinking when they set up a server. So what do we do now? We're looking for alternatives, and this is not just us being the ICANN or the IANA functions operator. In the general, we have to figure out how do we manage an internet where we really have built it to be outward. People can come in and use it whenever they want. The management side of this has always been an issue. It's been growing, and I think in this case here we didn't have a problem because things worked, but we don't know why they worked as much as we don't know why they may not have worked. It's still a little scary out there. We haven't solved that. We have to change some of our expectations about the network. People, early days, the internet was you came and you worked on it and you were responsible, and now it's more of a service where, leave it to me, I'll take care of it. But that leaves responsibilities out there that some people can't handle, and that's a problem that some people see the KSK. We're managing the KSK, but we're not really managing the experience of DNSSEC, we're just managing the KSK. We don't know what people are going to configure out there, and so we have to make sure we're prepared for the right thing. And innovation is needed here. We have to change some of our coordination model out there. One of the, and I want to make sure I don't get ahead of myself in my slides, one of the things we did at the end was we did a survey of operators looking at the autonomous system numbers that sent the key tag reports to us. So there was some good in that. And we discovered in the process of doing that we were afraid we were breaking some rules because there was no clear channel where we could use to say to someone, hey, look, I've never talked to you before, but I have to tell you something important about real operations. I'm not a spammer. I'm not abuse. I'm not this. We just kind of threw away that fear and contacted people, and we got a lot of good response for that. We had very little negative comeback about saying, well, you should have contacted me. In fact, just one person said this is an abuse of our system to tell us this. But it's interesting that the coordination through the internet gets harder over time because we fear the badness out there. And one of the, I'll save this point for a little later. And the other thing too, people keep asking us to visualize the KSK rollover better. And even after the fact, we still are sitting there, how can we make this visible? How can we make a visual out of this? The problem is that you have a resolver out there that just got a KSK configured in it, and sometimes we can't even access that resolver. We're not allowed, in some cases, to send a query into someone's ISP and say, give me information. It's reasonable. You know, if you do that, you open up for abuse if you let people come in. The open recursive servers, their job is to do that, but outside of that, there's only about 20 or so of those that are running. We can't get a whole lot of measurement out of that. So we really can't see what we want to measure, and so we can't really make it very visual. And only in cases where the resolver operator may participate in the feedback. So this is where I wanted to bring this up. So let's go beyond this project. Beyond the KSK and beyond DNSSEC, let's talk about the idea of coordinating this entirely massive system out there. One question that crossed my mind before this, and I never said it to anybody else before, is what if this doesn't work? What if we can't change the KSK? What if on October 11th, we change the KSK and within a few hours, people say, ISPs are failing all over the world, go backwards. What do we do then? The fact is we have to get off of the first KSK, the KSK from 2010. The reason is that it was made in 7 to 8 years ago. It's healthy, it's not been abused, no one's reverse engineered it. But at some point, you're going to buy equipment that can't do that math anymore. We have to get rid of it. At some point in the future, we have to get rid of it. And the longer we wait, the more pressure will be on doing it in a clean way. So I'm still scared. If we couldn't do this, the internet really is kind of hard to manage in a coordinated fashion. It won't be a very smooth event. So we have to think of a way to coordinate at a higher level everything that's going on out there. We've had the same problem for 30 years in terms of variation in code. And you don't have to run one of the 4 name servers I mentioned earlier, the bind, the unbound, not resolver, and Power DNS. There's also Microsoft. There's a few other commercial ones out there that are used all over the place. But there are people who run their own stuff, and we have no idea what that is. We've had this forever. We need to figure out a way to make this a bit more manageable if we want the internet to actually be reliable and smooth throughout the future. One of the things that has caused the internet to be a little harder to communicate is that we fear abuse so much. So many operators had in their whois records for their AS number only for abuse mail. I mean, only for mail about abuse. Don't send us spam, and so on and so forth. And we had to kind of get around a few spam filters to make sure, so the operator, we really want to make a change here because you might be in trouble, or your customers might be in trouble here. It'd be good if there was a more open way to send out an operational message across the internet in like the Flag Day too. The same thing, to keep pulling on yours because I need more material. Getting the message out to folks, really, we need to have a better way to get that out there. You know, if you come to a conference, you're already halfway there. It's the people who don't come to the conferences that I really am more afraid for. Oh, and so my final little tidbit. As I said, we did a survey in August, September, I believe, before the event of October 11. And we took all of the autonomous system numbers out there, and we tried to contact all the autonomous system members that had ever sent us any information about DNSSEC, 16,000 of them. And I was surprised by something. This is, if I take the number of AS numbers, I put a pie chart here, RIPE, the European RAR is a lot. ARIN, quite a bit too, and they're very large. LACNIC, if you look at LACNIC, it's these 2 pie slices together, the yellow and this slice here, which is LACNIC, not counting Brazil, and Brazil. Brazil alone, 18% of the world's AS numbers doing DNSSEC key tag reporting are from this one country. Now, to give you, I mean, I'm not saying Brazil, I don't expect you to be doing work, but to put this in the scale, you have APNIC is in here, in the others, which is the RAR for Asia, including Japan, which has its own NIR, like Brazil does, and AFRINIC. So all of Africa, all of Asia Pacific, they're in the other below in this region, but Brazil particularly. I said to someone, if we split the world into the 5 RIRs plus Brazil NIR, evenly divided them, they would have had the same number. Brazil's percentage matches like about 1/6, a little more than 1/6 of all of that, the 5 RIRs plus Brazil NIR. It's amazing that there are so many autonomous system numbers in this one country through through NIC, NIC.br, or NIC.br, I guess, or whatever you call the, I'm sorry, the National Internet Registry. Registry BR. Yeah. I meant sorry. But I was stunned by that. And of course, for poor Federico, what this meant was I had to send him a lot of email to get all those addresses because it was a little difficult pulling them, but that's not so Federico had to do a lot of work to help get the message out to people in Brazil. So with that, I'm going to stop my prepared slides. I don't know how much time is for questions. Okay, no more for me? No. All right, so questions, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah.
Any questions, please? Yes, we have Hugo. I don't know if he will speak Portuguese or English or Spanish. Let's see. English, so you don't need me.
The DNS flag day measurements and the rollover of the KSK is that the DNS flag day is about the authoritative servers. So authoritative is supposed to be open and public, and any resolver can ask something and see what answers. But the KSK is about the resolvers that are the ones that have the key. So the resolvers are supposed to be private, and that difficult and causes all the problems that you talked. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just only to make that difference.
Sure. Yeah, certainly. The many parts don't apply to both projects, but the coordination was, yeah.
Nós temos ainda tempo para alguma pergunta.
We still have time for another question.
Talk a little bit about the plans for the future afterwards. Yeah.
Oh, what a prepared question there. I'm surprised to hear you ask that. So, one thing, we've talked about this a little bit before internally, obviously. This project, we wanted to be able to do one role and get experience of doing this because we've never done this before. And this role is close to being finished. So I have kind of, well, let me put it this way. There are many things that could happen next. What will happen next is completely open. We're looking for input from the community on this. But to give you some ideas, we have things like, should we have an extra KSK in play? Should we have a backup one? Should we change the algorithm we use? Right now we're using the RSA SHA-256 as the algorithm. And we just rolled from one key of that to the roll of the key of the next one and the 2048 bits length. Should we stay with that? Should we keep doing that a couple times? And also, the big question is, like, how often? In 2010, a document said that we should look at rolling the key after 5 years. And after 5 years in English has a strange way of reading that. It could be after, it could mean begin looking 5 years from now, or at 5 years, make sure you've done it. But wait 5 years, but how soon? After 5 years, we began the process, so it's been almost 10 years that we've done this. So we probably should be doing this more quickly, depending on your attitude about whether operators want to have the habit of seeing this. So what I'm saying here is we have a bunch of options out there. We've looked at a couple of things, but I think it's going to matter because this key is not really a product of ICANN. It's not a product of the IANA Functions Office. It's not something we're running because we make anything off of it. It's public trust. So one thing that's going to come up is, what does the community think? People who spent more time on DNSSEC think should happen here. Because there's a lot to consider, and we're really open for input to that. However, I don't know when we plan to evaluate the input and how we're going to actually formally do that. So I'd like to dance that question that way.
Yeah, answer. Yeah, thank you. Mais alguma pergunta para o Ed?
Any other questions to Ed? As there are no more questions, thank you so much.